happening. We're seeing their life expectancy go up dramatically. You know, talking to my dentist, he says, look, we're trying to get kids' teeth to last them 100 years. Why? Because that's the life expectancy for these kids. You know, it's 78.2 years, 78.2 years now, and it's going nowhere but up. We are going up with that. So we are having these converging lines here, and so we've got to start talking about retirement ages. We've got to start talking about whether you know, a Warren Buffett really needs to collect a Social Security check. We need to have some of those honest conversations. And I'm prepared to do that. I think a vast majority of certainly my freshman colleagues are prepared to do that. What's getting in the way of a lot of the sort of the DC rhetoric of what we're dealing with. So that is sort of the table as we're being set. And I thought I'd at least give you some grain of hope. Somebody was asking about hope here, so let me. Yeah, and it's we'll see what's going to come out of this. But this is from Eric Cantor. It was at not quite an hour ago. I got this. I want to take a minute and update you on my ongoing discussions with the Vice President and the Senate regarding deficit reduction measures that must be passed if Congress is to raise the debt limit. As you know, Speaker Boehner has indicated that any increase in the debt limit ought to be accompanied by at least a commensurate reduction in the deficit. While discussions are still ongoing, I'm cautiously optimistic we can find sufficient common ground with the administration to enact spending cuts that meet the goal outlined by the Speaker. President, Speaker, and Harry Reid have all expressed their support for the work of the Biden group and their optimism for the cuts and reforms we hope to produce. I don't know if they're going to come up with something that I'm going to ultimately be able to support. Some of you may have heard me on NPR Saturday with Scott Simon. He asked me, could you see yourself voting to not raise the debt ceiling? And my answer was yes. And my concern is, and I even talked to the Holland Sentinel editorial board this morning, they had sort of a similar question, is my concern is why would we just continue to feed a system at just a higher level, but not change how we're doing the spending, not changing how we are curbing and rotating this trajectory of spending. You know, we are on the SS Badger. We are not on a Boston Whaler here. You know, it's not like you turn the wheel and you're going to flip it around. We didn't get into this overnight. We're not going to get out of this overnight. The most conservative budget that has been proposed, which I voted for, the Republican Study Committee budget, was a very aggressive budget. It brought balance. I think it was 9 years. John, you remember? RSC budget.
Yeah, 9.
It was 9 or 10 years.
Yeah.
All right, and it was pretty dramatic. All right, I felt I needed to put my vote where my mouth was and vote for that. But even that budget sees an increase in the debt ceiling for a while and some deficit spending, because again we're paying for some of the sins of the past, and we're going to have to take some time to work out of this thing. So that's kind of where we're at. I know you're itching to say something.
You had that analogy about the teenager spending more than he earns. The debt limit thing, that's the already occurred. This is the whole faith and credit. It's like the teenager borrowing from his mom, then saying, I think I'm going to spend more tomorrow, so I'm going to stop paying back. And it doesn't make sense there, and it doesn't make sense here. And the other thing is, the debt limit is not something to mess around with. It really isn't. And I'm sure you've had people from Wall Street, people who are not Democrats, tell you that. Especially...
Who here trusts Wall Street?
Right.
There's some serious issues.
Yeah. I mean,
yeah.
Okay, you guys are trying to water down all the stuff that's trying to keep Wall Street right, but the debt limit is not something to mess around with. You're essentially holding the economy of the United States hostage. I mean, you may as well just add on everything else. Let's repeal the ACA, but the president will often resign, or we're going to take the economy.
Hold on. Here's how I view that. Here's how I view the debt ceiling. All right, because you're right. It's that teenager that took mom's credit card.
Mom doesn't lend it.
Okay, no, here's the thing, though. Why why would we then take a slap on the wrist and say, Johnny, don't do that again? You can keep the credit card, by the way, and oh, we're not going to be monitoring what you're spending, and oh, you're not changing how you are spending. That's the problem here. We are not fundamentally changing how we are spending that. So again, I am all for making sure that we take care of our obligations for sins of the past. I'm trying to make sure that we are not committing sins in the future as well. And that is going to be our problem. So, are we going to be able to find a way to get there? We can't. There's a possibility. I'm not ready to turn a blank check over to Tim Geithner though and say, go right ahead.
The debt limit is something that you guys are controlling part of government now. The debt limit is something that needs to be raised.
The debt limit is absolutely significant.
Yes.
However, okay, he's just saying that we need to raise the debt limit and that we need to do that. No, that's not quite what he's saying. I think that's a logical conclusion, but that's not what he's saying. But you look at if we don't get our spending under control. All right, I sit on the Financial Services Committee. I'm on the International Monetary Policy Committee. You look at what's happening in Portugal and in Spain. Portugal, they had a couple of months ago, they had a prime minister resign. Why? Because they couldn't get an austerity budget through. Over the weekend, they elected a government that finally said that they were going to do that. Why? Because there's been a tremendous amount of pressure put on by the European Central Bank, the ECB. Right? Who's driving that bus are the Germans and the French. Now, I never thought I'd be listening to the French and saying, yeah, you're right, but they are actually driving that home. You look at what's happening in Greece, all right? They have simply not been able to get their fiscal spending under control. Has not happened. A 2-year bond in Germany, any guesses of what that interest rate is? 2%. 2-year bond in Greece?
9%.
Oh, 20%. That'd be outrageous. Try 25%.
Because you're worried you're not going to pay it back.
Yeah, they're worried they're not going to pay it back, but they're not going to have the money to pay it back because they can't get their fiscal house in order.
Right. You're
So that is. So I am saying that there are days of reckoning, and that we need to make sure that we are changing our behavior. And I'm not just interested in saying, here you go, we're not going to change behavior, we're just going to go ahead. So we've got a number of other people that want to move on to some other things that we've got to have, that we got to deal with. But I'll leave with this. And this wasn't a Wall Street type. This was a guy here locally who also follows us very, very closely. And he said to me, he said, Bill, you guys have got to take care of this, because it's not going to be easy. It's going to be painful. You have to take care of this, because if you don't, the marketplace will, and the marketplace will impose far more painful parameters than anything you guys are going to do. And that is part of what they're seeing with Greece, because they don't believe, because their debt to GDP ratio has grown so out of whack, they aren't going to be able to service that debt. We have debt. We have cash that comes in that could cover our debts. The question is would we be willing to then make the types of cuts in the programs that we need to have to service that debt? And that's what we're struggling through right now. So, okay. We've got. I know Tom wants specifics, so we'll get to Tom's on what we're proposing and what we're talking about. But I talked a little bit about short-term, medium-term, and long-term. Right? We touched on the long-term. We're going to have to deal with Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security as it's moving forward. And again, that's going to be significant for my generation.
Yeah, that's why military is always off the table.
Military is huge, and it's not off the table. I will tell you that some of the leading proponents within my caucus, of the 87 of us, freshman Republicans, 22, including one guy who's still flying for the Air Force as a reserve, there's 22 former military people. Most of them were either lieutenant colonel or above. These are the guys that make it happen. I mean, lieutenant colonels, they're the ones that are running the brigades, running the battalions, they're running the companies. And they are some of the first ones at the microphone saying, we've got to do better. We've got to be more efficient. I voted against the second engine for the F-35. Some of you at the first meeting may have heard me talk a little bit about this. This was it was a challenging one because there's a company in Muskegon that's making parts for it. GE is it's Johnson GE. There's about 300 people that have jobs, and I had to call which I did before I voted against them. I called the president of the plant and told him what I was going to be doing. It was a rather short and robust, I would describe it, conversation that we had. But we've got to look at everything. We have to look at everything, and that's we'll talk about the spending side, and I'll talk about the tax increase side as well.